here we are with Jill Stein, who is a Green Party presidential candidate in 2012, providing a much more substantial analysis than what you've just heard. Providing a much more substantial analysis than what you've just heard. Providing Jill, can you substantial analysis than what you just heard? If you have the stream on, kill the stream. Substantial analysis than what you just heard. If you have the stream on, kill the stream.
Okay, I'm going to kill the stream. Hang on.
If you have the stream on, kill the stream.
There.
And
how's that?
Great, you're live.
Okay. Great, and let's give this a try. If I start to distort, I'll call in on my phone. Would that work? I'm hearing a little distortion.
You sound fine.
I sound fine to you. Okay. All right, great. So shall I jump in? I'll just go ahead and thank you. Because after listening to that sugar-coated platitudes, empty rhetoric, I feel like a little bit of political therapy is in order. So as part of that therapy, I want to talk about the real state of our nation. The president just finished his speech before Congress, and as usual, is full of inspired, high-flying rhetoric and rosy promises for the future. But it's important to separate the reality from the stage show. And we need a real discussion of where we are so we can set our priorities right and secure the future for our imperiled families, communities, our country, and our planet. So I will say what you likely already know, that the State of the Union is not strong. It's actually quite troubled, and in critical ways, it's getting worse. But it is eminently fixable. We're facing unprecedented crisis, an economy in relentless decline for the vast majority, and a climate accelerating towards catastrophe. In addition, we face expanding endless wars and the attack on liberties, but solutions are ready at hand that can bring a just and sustainable prosperity that can rescue the climate and make wars for oil obsolete. And these solutions already enjoy majority public support. A movement for democracy and justice is rising up across the country and the world that is moving these solutions forward for people, peace, and the planet. And the Green Party is here to give that movement the political voice it deserves and must have in order to be effective. So before talking about those solutions, I first want to acknowledge what I didn't hear from the president, that the vast majority of Americans are struggling. Nearly 1 in 2 is now living below or near the poverty level, with children, students, elders, and people of color hardest hit. Nearly 49 million Americans have no health insurance. Over 6 million have had their homes taken through foreclosure. Average households lost an astounding 40% of their wealth in the recent downturn. And in low-income communities, this reached a staggering 90% of their wealth, thanks in large measure to this poverty and hopelessness and the failed war on drugs. Over 7 million people, largely poor African American and Latino men, are under correctional supervision, 10 times greater than the number in 1965. And 37 million college students and recent graduates are trapped in student loan president keeps bragging about, with half of graduates now in jobs that do not require a college education and do not pay commensurate with that education that 37 million students have gone in debt in order to achieve. Roughly 25 million Americans are unemployed or unable to find full-time work. Household income has fallen faster since the end of the recession than during the recession itself, because the recovery, as well as the vast majority of predicted future employment, is low-paying jobs. While record numbers are in poverty, the 1%, large corporations and the wealthy, have never had it better. The big corporations enjoy historic profits as they contribute less than any time since before the Second World War to the tax base that keeps the infrastructure going that their profits and our lives rely on. Big banks who are bigger than ever, thanks to the continuing bipartisan failure to rein them in. The second point I want to make before getting to the solutions is that the political establishment, Democrats and Republicans, is largely making the crisis, imposing austerity on everyday people while they continue squander trillions on endless wars, Wall Street bailouts, and tax breaks for the wealthy. The president is very much a part of that establishment, having campaigned on a populist platform of taxing the rich, saving Social Security, and making the economy fair. The president has once again morphed into an invaluable ally of the economic elite, willing to throw you under the bus. In his recent fiscal cliff deal, he did not tax the rich. He largely gave them the store. And he's now once again looking to cut Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. This is going to undo whatever benefit he might achieve by passing a minimum wage law. And let's hope that comes to pass. But I'm not holding my breath looking at the track record of the president's other promises in his previous addresses, including his State of the Union address last year. But needless to say, these proposed cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are absolutely unconscionable. And this continues the policies of the first Obama administration, which clearly did not make the economy fairer. And these policies are still driving the crisis. Trillions in Wall Street bailouts that are ongoing as we speak. $85 billion every month to continue bailing out the big banks. Corporate trade agreements that continue to send jobs overseas and depress wages at home. This is what the president was talking about in referring to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and how frightening that he's planning to do the same thing again now across the Atlantic. He brought us health care reform that locked out single payer and the public option, locked them out of the debate. He brought us drill baby drill energy policies, which he's still talking about. He brought us the sabotage of international climate accords, millions of avoidable home foreclosures, which are ongoing, and the dramatic escalation of immigrant deportation, as well as the expanding wars for oil and drone wars and assaults on our basic civil liberties and more. All of these policies were substantially promoted or controlled by the White House and cannot simply be blamed on those Republicans. Now, the political establishment, including the Obama White House, is making the crisis worse with its continuing obsession, which you heard over and over again in that speech, about the concocted budget deficit crisis. This is, in fact, a thinly veiled excuse for austerity. That is, for cutting social programs and for ignoring the unemployment, which is the real source of the deficit and the real source of the crisis. Let's be clear. This deficit resulted largely from the economic downturn brought on by Wall Street waste, fraud, and abuse. That downturn not only killed jobs, it also depressed tax revenues, causing the federal deficit to skyrocket. And it was further worsened by the endless immoral wars, the giveaways to the rich, and the private health insurance waste. Those austerity cuts now being advocated by the president and Congress are virtually guaranteed to make the deficit worse. Because when you cut programs, you cut jobs and the tax revenues created by the jobs. The more austerity, the more unemployment you create, and the worse the deficit gets. That's why austerity has proven over and over to worsen unemployment. In the 1930s, austerity turned a Great Recession into the Great Depression. And it's worsening the economic crisis in Europe right now. That's why the president's proposals and the Republican proposals to lower the deficit by cutting social programs, especially Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid, are dangerous and misguided. Social Security is not in crisis and does not need to be cut in order to be saved. The best thing for the long-term stability of Social Security is to simply lift the payroll tax cap and include capital gains and dividend income in the Social Security payroll tax pool. We can lower the deficit in the long run by creating jobs that generate revenue, and in the short run by taxing the rich, cutting the bloated military, and ending private health insurance waste through Medicare for All insurance system. As you know, we're facing not only an economic crisis, but the climate crisis too. In the past year, we've seen record heat, fires, storms, floods, sea level rise, drought, and rising food prices. As the president mentioned, some of that, but he clearly didn't understand what's driving it, because all of the above energy strategy does not fix it. And in fact, it's worse than just those things I mentioned. In fact, Antarctica and Greenland are melting 5 times faster than just 2 decades ago, leading to an estimated 6 feet sea level rise, and possibly much more by the end of the century, which is going to make the storms and the floods far worse and devastating, in fact. Already, 400,000 lives a year, including 1,000 children a day, are being lost due to climate change. The global economic cost is well over $1 trillion a year and 1.6% of global GDP, in fact. And this has huge costs, economic as well as human, in the United States as well. And all of this has happened with 1 degree temperature. That's 1 degree Celsius. Yet we are, and in fact, it's less than 1 degree Celsius. Yet we are already on track for 6 times as much temperature rise by 2100. That is a rise of 6 degrees Celsius. So you can imagine, if all of this is happening with less than 1 degree Celsius temperature rise, imagine what 6 degrees will be. As an example of what that means, consider this. When you have a heat wave now in Boston, New York, or other northern or Midwestern cities, we might see 95 or 100 degree weather for days at a time. But with the warming that's now in the pipeline, a heat wave won't just bring 100 degree temperatures, it will bring 125 degree temperatures. That is the future of heat waves that we are looking at just a few decades down the line. As we know, and you know, people will go down like flies in sustained 125 degree temperatures. The air conditioning, you can be sure, is going to fail, and the electricity will black out. And what you may not have thought about is that livestock will also be wiped out. All it takes is a day of that heat to eliminate your livestock. That is, all sorts of animal husbandry will be basically over, causing additional stress to the U.S. and the world supply, which would be drastically reduced to start in a warm. What's now that tipping at which certain key consequences of climate change trigger unstoppable acceleration of warming. And when that happens, it will render our climate incompatible with civilization as we know it, and potentially incompatible with human life as we know it. The worrisome thing is that these tipping points like the disappearance of polar ice caps and the melting of methane deposits in cold areas of the planet, that's already happening. That's why we simply cannot allow the climate to continue warming. To allow climate change to proceed is to engineer the demise, not just of our distant descendants, but quite possibly of our grandchildren and our children, and perhaps ourselves as well. That's why we must solve both the climate and the economic crises at the same time, and we must start now. They are ultimately one and the same. We can't solve one without solving the other. So now for the good news. We can fix both of these crises through a Green New Deal, an emergency program to create 25 million jobs to jumpstart the green economy, put a halt on climate change, and make wars for oil obsolete. The Green New Deal empowers communities to decide what jobs they need to become sustainable. It prioritizes jobs in clean renewable energy and conservation, in sustainable agriculture, in public transportation, as well as jobs that teachers, nurses, childcare, after school and home care, drug abuse and violence prevention and rehabilitation. It would create public sector jobs and establish a modern conservation corps and public works administration. It would jumpstart community-based small businesses as well as worker-owned cooperatives. It would cost far less than the 2009 stimulus package, less in fact than $500 billion. But that would create far more jobs. In fact, enough to jumpstart a real sustainable recovery, because we create jobs and provide tax breaks, which is an expensive and ineffective tool for creating jobs. It was tax breaks that was used in the 2009 stimulus package for the most part. So the Green New Deal, it could be funded, in fact, by cutting the bloated military to year 2000 levels, by saving hundreds of billions of dollars per year, and through doing that, and by taxing the rich. This includes a small 0.5% sales tax on Wall Street. They are paying 10% general for sales tax. So half is actually a very small thing to ask of the world's richest people. It would generate about $350 billion annually while reining in Wall Street speculation. So this is a win-win on all sides. In addition, we would increase capital gains and tax it as income, and income would be taxed more progressively, with multimillionaires and billionaires paying in the 50 to 80% range, like they did before the tax giveaways of recent decades. The Green New Deal would also be funded through savings that we get by eliminating health insurance waste through Medicare for All. This would provide health care to everyone while ending the massive, wasteful private health insurance bureaucracy and reducing the medical inflation that's overwhelming federal, state, and household budgets. And this would save trillions of dollars over the next decade. By jumpstarting the green economy, the Green New Deal can begin to rein in climate change. But we need to take several additional steps. One, we must enact a carbon fee to make fossil fuel companies pay for the costs of their carbon emissions and speed the transition to clean, renewable energy and efficiency and conservation. Two, we must rapidly shut down dirty energy by phasing out coal, nuclear, oil, and natural gas. And three, we must say no to all new forms of dirty, climate-changing energy. No to Keystone XL pipeline, no to tar sands oil, no to fracked gas and fracked oil, no to new mountaintop removal, coal, deep water drilling, and Arctic drilling. And number four, we need democratic control over our energy to ensure that we will leave the lethal fossil fuels in the ground and achieve a zero carbon full employment economy that's essential to save our planet and our children and our economy. I'll just mention, in addition, we need to end the student debt. Instead of bailing out the banks, let's simply redirect that $85 billion being spent by the Fed now every month to continue the Wall Street bailouts. Instead, we simply redirect that $85 billion a month from the bank bailouts to bailing out the students. And they will then be debt-free within the next year, actually within the next year and a half. But that's good time. In addition, we need to make public higher education free. We have done this over the past century for secondary school education, which was necessary for economic security. In the future, we need college education to guarantee economic security. So by extension, we should be paying that is essential. In addition, we know that it pays for itself. We know this from the GI Bill, which basically returned $7 in public benefits for every dollar that was invested. The actual cost of this is approximately $30 billion a year to get it jump started. This is a tiny fraction of what we are paying right now to bail out Wall Street. We also call for respecting immigrant rights as human rights, and this means providing a respectful and welcoming path to citizenship right now, not 15 years from now, as in the Obama plan. It also calls for ending the vicious and cruel deportations now, not continuing them as Obama is continuing to do. And we call for renegotiating the free trade agreements that caused these problems in the first place and creating fair trade agreements that end the flow of economic refugees into this country. And in addition, we call for ending the war on drugs, which is needed in and of its own right. It's also needed to provide the real border security that no border fence and no border wall can ever provide. Finally, we need to end the wars for oil and other resources that have created a permanent, immoral, and unaffordable war. That includes not simply withdrawing troops, and what the president announced tonight is a little bit late. He had previously said that the war would be turned over, in fact, to the Afghanis. If I am recalling correctly, he said the war would be turned over by 2014. Now he's talking about withdrawing about half of the troops by the end of 2014. So when exactly does this war end? We don't know. We need to bring our troops home now, and in addition, we need to put an end to these cruel, inhumane, outrageous drone wars, which are a threat to human rights everywhere and to civil rights and civil liberties everywhere as well. We need to end these drone wars and, in fact, lead an international convention to create a worldwide treaty, in fact, to put an end to these wars. And likewise on nuclear power, it is well and good to take the nuclear weapons on alert that are deployed, these deployed nuclear weapons, to reduce their numbers. That must be done. But we actually need to reduce the numbers of nuclear weapons as well. And while the president on one hand talks about reducing weapons deployment, on the other he has committed $600 billion to actually create a whole new generation of nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons delivery, including new missiles, new nuclear bombers, and new nuclear-powered submarines. So we need not just lip service to the concept of nuclear armament. We need real progress towards reducing the nuclear threat of these weapons, not simply between the United States and Russia, not simply looking at the potential of Iran to create nuclear weapons, but looking at nuclear weapons where they exist around the world. And that includes Israel, that includes Pakistan, that includes India. We need to begin a real progress towards nuclear disarmament to end this terrible scourge on our future. So to conclude, I'll just say that these solutions are available. They are within arm's reach. A Green New Deal can end the crisis in our economy as well as the crisis to our climate. Uh, and, and at the same time, we can create healthcare as a human right. We can end the immoral and endless wars, and we can create a respectful and welcoming path to citizenship and end the deportation. The public supports these solutions by substantial majorities. The missing link here is for us to stand up and to use that public support that exists to move forward and to reclaim the promise of our democracy and to implement the life-saving, planet-saving solutions we urgently need. The political establishment that got us into this crisis and keeps pushing us in deeper will not get us out. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We, the people, must reclaim our future. The vibrant social movements rising up around us are beginning to do that. And as the Green Party, we can give those movements the political voice they deserve. Together, we can begin to turn this breaking point we face into the tipping point we need to take our future back and make it healthy, just, peaceful, and green.
Thank you, Jill. It's interesting to compare what you've just said to Obama, and whereas Obama had mostly vacuous sugarcoating, you had substantial policy. Now, people can argue one way or another about whether they agree or not with different policy aspects, but it's far different to hear someone present a plan rather than empty rhetorical euphemisms that sound as if they were reworked from a fairly unsuccessful advertising agency. That's how I would characterize Obama's presentation compared to what you just talked about. Interesting in terms of watching the chat. There's a fair amount of agreement in what you're saying, of course. I have a few broad questions, having heard Obama and having heard you, and thoughts about the general state of the union. One thing that always comes to mind is that I can't help but wonder if there is a belief that Americans have lost their ability to critically analyze, because anybody with some sense of analytical abilities would see right through Obama's speeches as empty. I'm wondering how you feel about the state of the general public and whether why people find Obama credible, or maybe you feel they don't find him credible and they just accept him because they're not aware of a deeper analysis that you just presented. Go ahead.
I think, Craig, that's a really great point. And to me, it brings to mind how hard the politics to suppress alternative voices. When Sherry Honkala and myself went to the gates of Hofstra University, and tried to raise the issue that people don't have to settle for these two corporate-sponsored candidates that basically, agree with each other on most issues, from the expanding war to the undermining of wages and the exporting of our jobs and the corporate free trade agreements and privatizing healthcare and education and all the rest. People don't like being forced to choose between two horrible options that make their lives worse when people are already struggling. to keep their homes, to keep their jobs, to get a job, to get a decent wage, to pay down their debt. The reason they work so hard, the reason the Democrats and Republicans and their leaders work so hard to silence our voices, our alternative voices, is because the public so intensively resonates with what we have to say. So they rely on two things. One is silencing our voices, and the other is scaring people into thinking that, scaring especially the people who would agree with us, scaring them into thinking they have to vote their fears and not their values. This whole politics of fear thing. But, I think the answer to that is getting clearer all the time, because people are in such desperate straits these days. They really are beginning to see that what the Democrats have to offer may be a slightly less horrific than what the Republicans are offering. The cuts to Medicare aren't quite as steep. The cuts to health care aren't quite as bad. The austerity isn't quite as bad. It's terrible on top of an already desperate situation, but it's not quite as bad. People are realizing that the difference between Republicans and Democrats is no longer enough to save their jobs or to save their homes or to get them out of debt, or certainly not enough to save the climate, as we heard from Obama's basically drill baby drill continued policies. So as people wake up to that fact that it's a choice between a rapidly sinking ship or a slightly less rapidly sinking ship, that's no choice at all. I think increasingly people realize they have nothing to lose and everything to gain by standing up with the politics of courage and actually driving forward the real solutions that will get us out of this mess.
I'm not sure if you have Netflix or watched the series House of Cards. Rarely am I impressed with things that are nominally mainstream media, but of course Netflix is doing something very unusual and taking something straight to them, and this they actually outbid some of the mainstream media to get this show, although I can't imagine much of the mainstream media would be interested in it. House of Cards is a series about the Democratic majority whip and his wife, who heads a not-for-profit called Clean Water Initiative, and my hope is that enough people will see it that will get a sense of what the Democratic Party is really like. It so exposes how corrupt they are, and makes it so obvious. Kevin Spacey will actually turn to the camera periodically and explain why he's doing what he's doing. But I'm wondering if even some aspects of the media, because obviously, David Fincher and Kevin Spacey, who took the role, there were some writers and directors and producers who felt they needed to expose something, and apparently were able to convince somebody to invest millions of dollars to buy that. So I believe we lost Jill for the moment. Jill, are you still there?
Can you
Yes,
hear me?
you're fine. Okay, that's no problem. In fact, without the video, the audio may be better. But I'm wondering, how can we reach people given we don't have access to the mainstream media? What do we do? What are you doing besides now having run for president to get word out? Do you have a strategy for us or for activists in general to So much of what I hear is let's write a letter to Obama or petition or dissuade him from doing this or that when he has no interest in listening to us. And that's why I mentioned House of Cards, because it's very evident who pays their tune. Go ahead. What is your plan? What do you think we should be doing?
Well, I would encourage people who are not yet plugged into my campaign website to do that, because we are still running strong. And the election, or let me put it another way, just because they held a rigged election doesn't mean that the fight is over. The fight is ongoing. And at this point, and the people who were engaged in the campaign are very much still fighting the fight, and in many ways. So, for example, we are mobilizing for the upcoming February 17th mobilization in D.C. There will be a strong Green Party contingent. We will be there with our message. Our message is not simply stop the pipeline, but stop the fracking, stop the mountaintop removal, stop the exploration of the Arctic, stop the nuclear power, stop all of that. And in fact, the alternative to it is the full employment, clean energy economy of the future. We're talking about fixing the economic crisis as we fix the climate crisis. We need holistic, comprehensive solutions. We can't do this with single bullets. We got a big problem ahead of us, and we need the big vision solutions. We will be there talking about it, that we need political change, not climate change. We will be carrying those signs because we know that you will not get the policy changes that we need unless we are also getting the political changes that we must have. The two go hand in hand. So we will be there on the 17th, and we will be there with the climate movement. We will be there with the anti-fracking movement. We will be there with Occupy, with workers fighting for decent wages and for decent benefits. We will be there with the teachers who are fighting to stop the privatization of schools and the closings of schools and the testing, the commodification of education into these oppressive testing regimens. So these movements are going on, and we will be there with them, actually in the trenches. And we encourage you to network through our website for starters, and also network with your state Green Party. If your state doesn't have a Green Party, get in touch with our campaign, and we'd like to help you form one. But by staying in touch with the National Party, with our campaign, and with your state parties, that's how we continue to build this force and create our own networks that do an end run around the corporate control of the media. And one add, which is just that we're doing candidate trainings right now all around the country. You will see them on our campaign calendar at jillstein.org. And if you can possibly go to one if it's near you. If it's not, let us know, and we'll do our best to create a campaign school in your area. So we are taking
Hello, Jill? I think I lost your audio for a moment. Keep talking if you can. Oh, okay. Come back if you can, Jill. She's coming back. I see it's connecting. Hang tight. She may be having connection issues. You can see little dots show it's connecting. I will make a comment, though, that another reference to House of Cards. There's another one of the episodes, several episodes, in which the Democrats offer as a bargaining chip, or I should say use as a leverage chip against the teachers, a piece of legislation which includes basically limiting or ending the teachers' right to collective bargaining. Again, this is House of Cards is actually very interesting that way. Here the Democrats are tossing away organized labor. I'm wondering what I will ask Jill if she comes back on is whether she will be speaking at the February 17th event. Well, it looks like Jill is now offline, so I think we lost her. But my hope is that the Greens get a speaking spot there, because I think we've earned the right to speak at the February 17th rally. And so it's part of Syracuse, ULA, could be Ursula. Greens won't have a speaking spot on February 17th. Jill was denied a spot on February 17th rally, and this is typical of how we get shut out. When I brought up the idea of mainstream media and how at least there's a show that now blatantly and upfront and viciously attacks the Democrats for what they're doing, and even eschews very few liberal Democrats. Yet we, an alternative, are still being shut out, and I think that's a large part of the what we face, of the problem we're hit with in terms of reaching the public. Even when we see overt criticism of the Democratic Party, as House of Cards is doing, what we don't see is any room amongst some of the mainstream not-for-profit groups, which is also a message in House of Cards. There's no room for alternative views. There's no alternative in this case. I think mainstream. I think if people knew the details, just as Jill laid out, that we could actually garner support. I mean, people have to see that that there's real program and policy behind it, and it's not that everybody would agree with all the policy, but it's that when you start to present something where you have a plan, a detailed plan that people can grasp, you can get support. What I'd like to do now is bring on Gregg Jocoy. Jocoy, I think I'm pronouncing his name right. I apologize if I'm not. Who has a radio show called Occupy the Microphone, so we can hear from him his thoughts about both Obama's presentation and Jill Stein's presentation, and what way forward for the Green Party. Hi, Greg.
Hi, y'all. I'm sorry, I had to turn off the chat in the Ustream or live stream or whatever it is, so that I could get to you.
So what do you think? Just funny comment in the chat room. I love storytelling. Someone commented about my beard looking much like Karl Marx.
I was thinking Santa Claus, but go ahead.
The funny thing is, a couple of weeks back, while going on to the New York City subway system, a transit worker stopped, turned at me, pointed his hands at me, and said, "Karl Marx," and gave me a thumbs up. and I don't know if when we talk about, I was mentioning a little bit about organized labor briefly when I was talking about teachers, but the TWU tends to be one of the more activist, and I hate to use the word lefty, but we're more outside the mainstream unions. And that, so I thought it was funny to see a transit worker see me and say Karl Marx and give me a thumbs up. The interesting thing about TWU is that while I don't think we've had endorsements from them yet, when they do their endorsement meetings, they have been inviting Green candidates for the interviews. So we do know that the TWU are looking at us in New York.
Sure.
So part of what, in terms of what we need to do as we move forward is see if we can break through to unions like that we know are paying attention to us, and they're just looking for the right moment, and that's what we need to do, figure out what that right moment is for them to pull the trigger and say enough is enough, and we're going to support a Green candidate.
Well, let me interrupt for just a moment, if I might, Craig, and talk about that for a moment. We ran here in South Carolina, for those of y'all who don't know, I live in South Carolina and I'm on the South Carolina Green Party Steering Committee, and we ran Tom Clements for the United States Senate against Senator Jim DeMint, who recently resigned his position in the Senate to head up the Heritage Foundation. Our candidate was endorsed by the Columbia Labor Union Council in Columbia, South Carolina. And they made a campaign contribution to his campaign. Now, the reason that happened is because one of the members of the leadership of that that union group asked them to do so. And because they trusted him and he trusted Tom, they made the endorsement and they made the campaign contribution. So I want to address something that someone has said in the chat and was talking about repeatedly, and that was local, local, local. The Green Party needs to be local, and they were also emphasizing that the Green Party needs to be perceived of as being a centrist party, not being perceived of as a leftist party. And I think that Lou was exactly right when he said we're not left or right, we're out in front. And that's not just rhetoric. Let me share an example with you, if I might, real briefly. And I know that this might upset some people who do consider themselves to be on the left side of things, but it's simply the truth. On today's show, Occupy the Microphone, we interviewed Art Goodtimes for a little while. Now, Art is a member of the San Miguel County Council in Colorado and an elected Green, and has been reelected repeatedly. So this is a local office. And part of what he told us today on today's show was that when the county council in San Miguel County was considering local legislation that had to do with gun control, he went to the community that he represented and spoke with them about that to find out how they felt. And then he voted against the letter that they intended to send because while he agreed with it on a personal level, he did not feel that he would be representing his constituency by signing the letter as it was initially written. So I think people need to understand members of the Green Party can have political positions, individual political positions that are on the left or the right of what you might call the center, or right smack dab in the middle of the center. But the bottom line is Greens are dedicated to 10 key values. No money in politics. Money is not free speech. Corporations are not people. That is what the central message of the Green Party is, and that's whether you're talking about a school board candidate, a county council candidate, a state legislative candidate, or someone running for Congress or the president.
Yeah, there's no doubt a lot of truth in what you say in terms of working outside the labels. When we talk about being outside the two-party system, sometimes it's best to be outside the labels and be open to unusual coalitions. We've had them here in New York. One of the odder ones, going back, I guess it was some 15 years ago. There was legislation in Congress that would have put alternative health care in control of the FDA, which basically would have pretty much killed the use of supplements and ended the use of the ability for people to even seek homeopaths or naturopaths. And the irony is one of the groups that came out, because of course we Greens support, many of us Greens, I should say, I won't speak for everybody, many of us Greens support alternative healthcare, or sure. Are not that allopathic healthcare is always wrong, but the thing is there are other things that have been used in other cultures.
Certainly, many of them for centuries.
So who would join us but members of the Conservative Party? There's a Conservative Party in New York, because they, their take of it on it was slightly different, but they didn't like the fact that the government was going to control our right to choose alternative health care or to choose nutritional supplements. So there was, the groups of us going to the health food stores, because we thought they were the people who would be most impacted, having their store shelves emptied, and would collectively probably have some economic resources to lobby. So there we were, both Greens and Conservatives working together in common. And ironically, a couple of years later, when I was running for office, a couple of Conservative Party district leaders said that they were going to recommend their members vote for Green candidates. And he said, while we don't agree with you on a lot of things, he said, one, we know we can work with you on the things we do agree on. And he said, we are not Republicans. It's conservatives, so there's a difference. And he said, also, you're the only other party that works on moral and ethical principles, that you're not for sale. Because they get that, being conservatives, they get that from the Republicans. Just as,
Sure.
Greens, people always say, well, aren't you just liberal Democrats? And we say no. And people would approach them as Conservative Party members, aren't you just, conservative Republicans? And they would have to say no. So sometimes when you address issues and approach, break through the rhetoric, you can form unusual bases of support. In fact, at one point, even the Republicans were interested in us Greens. The Republicans in New York are very interesting. I don't want to go into a lot of detail about that, but
well, I want to say something here, if I might, Craig.
Okay.
If we're going to accomplish anything in South Carolina, it's going to happen with a lot of Republican Party people voting for us. And we have one elected member of a local body, and that's Eugene Platt, who's a member of the James Island Public Service Works Commission. And I love the kitty cat in the background. That's pretty nice. And I think that I don't have any problem working with a person who is principled. I don't care if they're a principled conservative, a principled liberal, whatever. If they have principles, we can work together. But the people who are opportunists, who are simply looking for a way to make money, a way to establish more power and influence, those people I have no use for, and they're very, very difficult to work with, because if you don't meet their very specific need for, voting for this legislation, regardless of your ethics or your morals or your positions, etc., if you can't vote in favor of this thing that's going to put money in my pocket, I can't help you down the road. I have no interest in working with those people.
That sounds almost like it could be out of House of Cards. But
well, I haven't seen that. I've heard you talking about it, but that really is the way I feel. Life is too short. I'm 55 years old. I don't have another 40 years on this planet. And I want to see something get done. And as I say, if it's going to happen in South Carolina, to a certain extent, it's going to be because a lot of Republicans who are principled Republicans voted for us.
Yep.
And sometimes that's going to happen because they realize the people they've elected from their own party are charlatans.
Yeah, there are people, I think, when you talk about the public, the people we need to reach, there are people who highly value integrity, something that doesn't really exist coming from politicians across the spectrum.
There's Jill.
They're calling us now. But
Were there any more questions that folks had in the chat room? I want to make sure that we address them.
I see a lot of discussion back and forth.
Are they all yelling at me?
No, there's stuff about what's left and socialism and things of that nature, and who is this? As a friend of mine, Aaron Kay, said something about, quoted his friend Abby Hoffman, isms or wasms. I think it's been. See, I blew that joke. Mm-hmm. Isms or wasms.
Well, tell Aaron I said hi, and tell him that Daisy Deadhead had said hi too.
Yeah. Aaron is often with us on things.
I love Aaron.
Yeah. The Pie Man.
We're Facebook friends.
For those who don't know, Aaron Kay was, or is still known as, the Pie Man. What he was famous for back in the 70s and 80s were pieing people like Jerry Brown or Daniel Patrick Moynihan or several other elected officials. So...
and I think that he pied that idiot woman in Florida, the anti-gay rights advocate.
Yes, Ms. Orange Juice.
Right.
Anita Bryant, wasn't it? Anita Bryant. Right.
I did want to talk for a moment about the president's State of the Union address specifically, though, if I might.
Go ahead.
One of the things that occurred to me as I was reading the text, and I got online a little bit late, so I was reading the text trying to catch up with where the president was at. And one of the things that occurred to me is that he was basically telling the Congress, I'm looking to move as far towards corporations as I possibly can. I want to push our schools to get involved with the military-industrial complex. I want our schools to get involved in special coalitions with businesses, etc. I want to see universities training not people for critical thinking, but people for jobs. And this sort of thing, I believe, should be very scary, once again, to principled people. Because what he's doing is presenting us with an opportunity to become a cog in the wheel. And really and truly, we're not, and I realize that there are plenty of Greens who don't think that we're spiritual beings in any way, shape, or form. But for those of us who do believe that we are spiritual beings in one way or another, there is no way that we can perform our responsibilities as a spiritual being or as part of humanity if we are simply a cog in the wheel. Now, the president also talked during his presentation about things like cutting Medicare and how this was something that he wanted to work with the Congress to accomplish, saying specifically that he endorsed the Simpson-Bowles Commission reports. The Simpson-Bowles Commission reports essentially are designed to cut government programs that benefit individual people and replace them with tax cuts for very rich folks. And the truth of the matter is, I was actually talking with my wife about this earlier tonight, and I said, as terrifying as it is, the prospect that so many people are going to be injured by these cuts, the truth of the matter is that may be what it takes to wake up some people who are just completely oblivious to the fact that this stuff is coming. What we're seeing happening in Greece, what we're seeing happening in Spain and other parts of the world are the kinds of things that can and will be happening here in the United States. And we have seen nothing like that here yet. And I guess that I need to keep on talking because Craig is otherwise occupied right now. Is that all settled? Okay, good deal. So were there any other comments? As I say, I really did want to. The other thing that I wanted to say too was that in listening to what Jill had to say, the thing that excited me the most was Greens all across the planet are recognized for having not just questions and bringing up problems, but presenting solutions. Mm-hmm. And the kinds of solutions that Greens have been presenting worldwide are consistent. And when I heard the president talking about the growing the economy and things of this nature. This is commonplace by every mainstream and extremist politician pretty much around the world, except for Greens. Greens seem to be the only people who can stand up and say, at some point we have to acknowledge the fact that we live on a finite planet. It doesn't matter if we replace oil with hemp oil. If we're burning it, we're still destroying the atmosphere. We're still doing damage to future generations. So we recognize the need for real fundamental change, and you'll never hear the phrase steady state economy applied by a Democrat or Republican because they're afraid of that idea. If we get to the point to where we say, okay, we have enough stuff, now what we have to do is figure out how to distribute it in a way that provides for everyone's needs. That's just a terrifying prospect for them. And I disagree with the fellow who was commenting in the chat room that these changes can only come at the end of a gun. You won't find anybody more nonviolent than your average Green.
Yeah, I think there's a resistance to the phrase sustainability, and we have a system and a culture which whose solution to every problem is unbridled growth. What we need to do, it's like trying to outgrow the problem by creating more, bigger, consuming more, and you can't. When you consume faster than the ecosystem can sustain it, it's almost like the virus that eats its host until both the host and of course the virus dies because the body dies, and that kind of analysis doesn't just completely flies by. Well, I won't say it flies by the elected officials. I somehow, I feel that some of them are actually aware of this, but it's just not important. It's not like, one of the things that does get me about Greens, it's one of the peeves. There's some truth, but there's some bother in it for me that Greens are always trying to, we must educate them because they don't understand. And the thing is, I think oftentimes they do understand, and they just don't care because they have another motive. It's clear that Obama is aware of the climate crisis, but he has bigger interests than solving it, but in a way that we would consider solving it. His method is, how can I use this to create more money for the corporations to offer more solutions? Where's the product in this? That's what he's looking for. Right. Where's the product? Where's the thing? How can we use climate crisis to sell something so that the corporations can make money off of it? Have a greener planet and buy our thing. We'll just natural gas. Well, I guess all gas is natural the same way a disease is natural. The problem is I don't want to hasten our death by natural causes. Cancer is a natural cause also.
Well, I had a fellow, the same fellow that I mentioned who assisted Tom Clements in getting the endorsement from the Central Labor Council in Colombia. I asked him one day, I said, I don't get it. Why is it that these people who are running the corporations, etc., why can they not see what we see? I mean, they've got to be as smart as we are. Why can they not see how they're damaging the planet and hurting their own families' futures? And he said, Greg, they do see it. They don't care.
That's it.
And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they not care? A dog doesn't poop in his own, space. It's like, it doesn't make sense for human beings to behave like this. And he said, I'm not necessarily saying that he's exactly right, but I think it made sense. He said, the reason they don't care is because they're getting theirs. They look at it as, hey, I'm going to live to a certain age and I'm going to be as comfortable as I can possibly be. And if I have to oppress a whole lot of other people to get that comfort, that's a compromise I'm certainly willing to make. And this is part of why when I hear, and I live in the deep South, so we see a lot of religious folk around here. And when I see these religious folk, I don't understand how they can be hoodwinked by the politicians who know, who know that they have to lie to them to get their vote. And I don't understand why they're simply willing to accept these statements that are in direct conflict with what they're learning at church on Sunday.
Yep. It's I'm amazed at the lie that people, and I don't know if people accept it, but the lie that people tolerate, I don't know if I should say accept, it's the question I asked Jill about, do you think Americans have lost their ability to critically analyze? Because it really just takes, I don't think it's rocket science to see where things are headed, and if you listen to Obama's speech, it doesn't take a master's degree to see that it sounds like, as I said to Jill, it sounds like a badly written advertising slogans. It really, then the next step is the public and whether they feel empowered to do something about it. And I mean by empower, nobody so much really gives them the power. They have to believe they have the power. That's all it would take to elect Greens, for example. Once a candidate's on the ballot, really, all you need to do is check the box, pull the lever, or whatever voting mechanism you use to have at least a fighting chance. And it's true they may steal the election, but people at least are very conscious of elections being stolen. Given the way the media does pay attention to that, at least they may not pay attention to ballot access, but they pay attention to the potential of stolen elections. And all it would take is for people, there are people who would nominally support Jill Stein, but their response is, well, she can't win. Well, actually, technically, she, it's like, yeah, she could if you just vote for her. She's on in enough states. Granted, the state she wasn't on couldn't do anything, except write in. But yeah, once you understand you have the ability to make that decision, because the option is there, and you proactively seek the information, you just have to do a very simple act of I'm going to do this. And it's not a protest vote. It's because you want that candidate to win. And this whole thing about protest vote. I don't want to protest. I want to win. I don't want to protest while the gun's pointing at my head. I don't want the gun pointing at my head. And you know what? It's like being in a football game. So, they might, say, yeah, but it's a long shot. When you're down by 6 points and there's 10 seconds left on the clock, sometimes you throw the Hail Mary pass, and once in a while you complete it. I don't want to make
tonight on Jeopardy. My mother-in-law is a stroke patient, and I go up and watch Jeopardy with her most every night. Tonight was the team tournament. It was a 2-day final tournament. On the first day, one of the contestants won like $15,000. The next one won $18,000. The third one wound up with like $3,000. I was absolutely convinced there was no way in the world that this boy from Georgia was going to wind up winning this deal. It just wasn't possible. $18,000, $15,000 versus $3,000. Guess what? He won the whole shooting match. He got like $37,000 in today's game. So I'm sorry, folks. We're not looking for anything bizarre. We're asking people to vote in an election.
Yep.
It's not really a strange thing to ask people to do. What we've got to do is we've got to do more asking. We've got to knock on more doors. We've got to talk to more of our neighbors, and we've got to specifically ask them, I'm running for city council. I'm running for school board. I'm running for the State House of Representatives, and I'm asking you today, will you vote for me on Tuesday? And we're not doing that nearly enough. We're simply saying, these are my positions, this is my party, these are the things I believe in. Thanks. No. Ask them for their vote. Ask them for $20. Ask them for $5. Ask them to put up a yard sign. Ask them to put a bumper sticker on their car. Ask them to talk to somebody in their neighborhood. Ask them to hold a house party. And I know all these things are uncomfortable. I know they're uncomfortable. But it ain't nothing compared to the discomfort that's coming if we don't make some serious changes.
Yeah, that's...
And I know I'm preaching to the choir, and I like to preach, but...
Yeah, well, it's important because I think a lot of Greens who run for office, because even amongst the choir, a lot of Greens who run for office are intimidated by asking. They're afraid to. You know, it's funny because, again, House of Cards. One of this side comment where, you know, the congressman is going through his schedule and his chief of staff has said, it's from this time to this time, you're making fundraising phone calls. As they're booked to do it. That's what they do. And you know, the first people you ask your friends and your family. Oh, I can't ask my friend. No, you ask your friends and your family. And then you ask their friends and family, and you keep asking. You know, you can't stop. And I know too many Greens who are reluctant to it, or they'll say, well, I'll run without any money, which is, you know, there's some nobility in that, but the reality, it does take some, not a lot less than people think. One of the things that Bill Hillsman said in his book Run the Other Way is he said there's so much waste talking about, you know, in political consultants and how much is spent in advertising. He said a well-run campaign can probably win with about 1/6 the money of their opponent. So we're not talking about like even, you know, you just need a reasonably small amount compared to your opponent. If you spend it properly and do the proper outreach, and he gave examples in like the Jesse Ventura campaign, which, regardless of how you feel about his politics, but Hillsman said that they didn't have money for advertising, yet he did a TV commercial. What they did is they held a press conference for the commercial. And he said the news media gave the commercial more play than they could afford to buy, because of course the commercial was entertaining, and because of that they got the donations so they could run the commercial. And the other thing he did is all the political consultants were going after prime voters. He said nobody was going after young people. So rather than trying to chase after the same people in a crowded onslaught of messages, he went to the people that everybody was ignoring, young people, and that basically is what put him over the top on election eve. Scott McClarity has a question from the
Hey Scott,
from the chat room. Obama talked about making safer pipelines during the State of the Union. Is this preparation for announcing an approval for the Keystone XL pipeline?
I'm inclined to believe that it is, and I know that I heard a person recently talking about the pipeline, and they had literally run cameras into the pipeline to look for holes in the pipes that had been welded up and so on, identified holes in the pipe, told the people who are building the pipeline there are holes there, that's where they are, and they still sunk the pipeline into the ground.
Yeah.
So they're anticipating this. This is part of their plan. This is part of their business plan. We don't get to see their business plan, but that's part of their business plan. And President Obama's speech to me clearly said that he is going to advance nuclear power, he is going to advance fracking, he is going to advance the Keystone XL pipeline. He's going to do everything that the corporate donors to his campaign told him to do. And everyone needs to understand this. I know that there have been people who have been critical because the stream isn't working perfectly and so on like that. And I understand and appreciate that. But understand this. President Obama and Romney, both of them had 10,000 times the money to run their campaign than we had. At least 10,000 times as much. And that doesn't even count all the attention that they got for free from the media, etc., which we did not get hardly any of at all by comparison. We did much better this year than we've ever done before. I was exceptionally happy with the coverage that we got from Democracy Now! And from other outlets. But let's be real. Jill Stein and Sherry Honkla were never on ABC. They were never on NBC. They were never on CBS. They were never on Fox, not as part of an ordinary news report. And if they were on once, they certainly weren't on once a week. So, I appreciate wanting the Green Party to do a better job very much. I think that's valid. I think that's important. But let's not forget how little our resources are and how far we've come.
And the irony is, some people will say, "Why should I vote you? You don't have enough money." And my response is, that's probably a good reason to vote for us if you consider where money comes from. I mean, it's like saying, you're not tainted, so we can't vote for you. It's some of the reasoning is like, it's funny. This is like, again, getting to the analytical reason. If you look at what people are saying and actually translate it, no, you don't have enough money. So you won't vote for me because I'm not corrupt. I'm not funded by corporations. So you will only vote for a candidate funded by corporations, and then we'll complain about the consequences you get. It's like, pointing the gun at it and pulling the trigger and getting frustrated because the barrel's empty. So I'm going to keep pulling it until the bullet comes out and say, there! There's just something twisted in the reasoning people use for who they vote for candidates, and that's something that always floors me about the public. I remember once when I campaigning, I was handing out flyers, a very low budget thing, and somebody said, well, you're taking up space on the street corner and you're handing out flyers, and that's littering. And it's like, I wasn't throwing the flyers on the floor, and they didn't have to either. Their paper was certainly recyclable, and it was recycled paper I was using. And I'm thinking, like, so you're saying I shouldn't do any outreach? Is that what? So I shouldn't hand out flyers. Now, if I ran commercials, you would complain how horrible seeing all these commercials were. If I took out ads, you would say, well, I hate all the ads. It's funny. At one point, I actually did something that, again, another thing people don't like, is I put flyers under windshields on cars. Because being in an urban area like New York City, we'd often fly our subway stops. And I, during one campaign, came to the conclusion, I said, yeah, well, that's great if you, what about all the people who never take the subway? So I had people who complained about that, and finally I got a call from a reporter from a major newspaper, and he said he grumbled about because he thought he carried his weight. He grumbled about how he stuck a flyer under his windshield, and they said, well, he wasn't even aware I was running until he saw the flyer. He told that to me. He said, I didn't even know you were running. And then you stick this flyer, and what a piece of junk that you put, not that the literature was junk, but that he stuck a flyer. And I said, well, it seems to have gotten you to call me, and if you don't like it, I guess the alternative is that you would prefer me to be silent, then you definitely wouldn't know I was running. So I pointed out that his logic was rather circular, in that...
Hey, democracy is inconvenient. It's also expensive. Yep. This is just reality. And people who don't want democracy to inconvenience them, people who don't want folks knocking on their door and asking for their vote and so on like that, are just going to have to suck it up. This is the system we live in. And if you don't like that, you do exactly the same way I do when a religious solicitor comes to the door. I say, thank you, I'm not interested, and close the door and move on. It takes 2 seconds. Yep. He didn't like having the flyer on his windshield. He spent more time calling you to complain about it than it would have taken for him to simply fold it up and lay it on the seat and toss it out when he got home.
And the irony is he was a journalist who covered politics, who wouldn't have known I was running. And I actually, I'd asked him, I said, well, I live in your neighborhood and I'm running for local office. And I said, do you read? Because I was actually getting pretty good coverage in the local newspapers. And they said, don't you read the local newspapers? You would know about me that way. And if everybody did, then I wouldn't need to put flyers on people, because they would. Well, the local newspapers were free.
Right.
He said, no, I don't read the local newspapers. He said, there's no news in them. And I'm like, oh. Hey, and I'm saying to myself, and you're a writer for a living who works at a larger newspaper. I guess that's why the bigger newspapers don't cover local news, or don't get the connection. But it's interesting how the rationalizations people use to divorce themselves from what's going on, which gets back to why I raised the question about people lost their ability, to do critical thinking. I think I don't want to say anything pervasive like that. I actually think a lot of people do think critically. Some portion of them don't know where to find the alternative, and the other portion thinks critically, but are in such despair. It's like there were people who vigorously supported Obama, and there were people who really felt he was an evil, but just a lesser evil. And the problem is they knew he was an evil. They just haven't been able to make the leap into choosing something that's not evil. It's like if you're given two choices. One expression I like to use is the anesthesiologist at the executioner's gurney. You have a choice of being killed and feeling the pain, and you have the choice of having the anesthesiologist, so you won't feel the pain. And they prefer the anesthesiologist. And my response is, I prefer to live. I don't want either. And we shouldn't be limited that way, but people seem to be afraid. Some people seem to be afraid to get beyond that, even though they understand. And it's that gripping fear that keeps people from moving forward. And it's why, you'll see some portion of the public thinking Obama did great, and there are other people who will see it for what it is, as an empty speech, but saying, well, at least I'm glad it's Obama's empty speech and not Romney's empty speech. And then we hear Jill Stein.
Right.
And they don't get to hear something that actually includes policy.
Well, I don't want to say that President Obama didn't present any ideas or have any plans. I think that he did have some clear plans and clear ideas. But I think that they were not the sorts of ideas and plans that will benefit the average American person. When he talks, for example, about bringing corporations and universities together and making sure that businesses working in cooperation with the Department of Defense and the Energy Department, and everyone needs to understand what I understand. Energy Department means nuclear weapons, okay? Believe it or not, folks, that's who runs our nuclear weapons program. It's the Department of Energy, not the Defense Department. So when I hear the president saying that, that's a specific plan. That's a specific plan to bring, to quote unquote, bring jobs home. And I think that people do need to understand too, when the president says that he's going to pursue this Trans-Pacific Partnership Plan and then expand it into a Transatlantic Partnership Plan. Have anybody, I would guess that 9 out of 10 people who are listening to that have never heard of these things, and it simply slipped in one ear and out the other. It doesn't sound particularly controversial, but those of us who are in the Green Party, I would guess, probably do know that the president has taken all of this business and turned it over to private corporations, and we're not even allowed to know what they're negotiating with their partners, other private businesses in other parts of the world. This is not a negotiation between the United States government, the Japanese government, the Thai government, and the Philippine government. This is a negotiation between corporations. And I'm sorry, anyone who thinks there's an American corporation today is wrong. There are no American corporations. There are no Japanese corporations. There are no British corporations. They're all transnational corporations. And they don't care about anything but money. As George Carlin said, they don't give an F about you. They don't give an F about you. They don't give an F about you. They only care about money. And listen, I love money as much as the next guy. But I also like to be able to breathe. I also like to be able to enjoy my constitutional rights. I also like to be able to eat healthy food. I also like to be able to hope that my children will learn critical thinking, not just how to, put widget A into box B and become a cog in the wheel. They're basically saying The Simpsons is on every night. You can grab a Big Mac on your way home, pick up a six-pack, settle down, and, eventually you'll just get dull enough that you'll fall asleep. And that's simply not good enough.
Yeah, your comments about corporations versus countries almost sound straight out of say, I guess I'm very, these last few weeks, very culturally, media cultural sensitive. How do I say it?
Good for you.
It sounds like straight out of the movie Network. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true, and it's funny. Decades have passed, and despite that, people are still stuck. People. I should say. I don't want to say countries either. Corporations get to do what they want, and then you have the spin about government is bad and ineffective, so therefore we have to privatize everything because somehow the corporations are so much more efficient, and yet people only see government, corporations. There's something else missing. The public. How about public control? Go ahead.
In his speech, President Obama specifically said that he wanted to that something along the lines of the government is not the solution. We need to empower individuals and corporations to make decisions in their own best interest, something along those lines. I'm sure I've mangled it terribly. But the point was, what the message that I got from that was, we in the government are not going to be at all interested in worker-owned cooperatives. Don't turn to us if you want to start a food co-op. Don't turn to us if you want to start any kind of cooperative effort whatsoever, because that doesn't benefit the people that I represent. And this is something that I think we should be very concerned about, because the president is once again talking about taking our individual money and giving it to other people. And when people say, and I don't hear this very often, I'm glad to say, they tend to say it more about Democrats than they do about us, but when people say, you progressives, you Greens, you liberals, you radicals, whatever phrase they want to, you're just pro-government, I immediately put up my hand and say, no, you do not understand. I ain't pro-government. People talk about socialism and how, the Green Party needs to be more, needs to take a socialist stance and so on like that. I don't have any truck with that. I don't have any problem, whatever. You can believe whatever you want to. But Chernobyl happened in an ostensibly socialist country. There were gulags in ostensibly socialist countries. There are prison labor camps in the United States. Don't get me wrong, but there's also a lot of them in these so-called socialist countries. So the economic system is not necessarily the be-all and end-all of the answers to the problems that we face. Yeah. It's just one piece of the puzzle. That's why we have 10 key values, not one key value.
Yep. What people don't. This is again people thinking. People have what I call definitive rather than infinitive thinking. They have. We tend to break things into parts and not understand. And this is where ecology comes in. The ecosystem is an interrelationship. It's not either or. It's an interrelationship, and that's what attracted and attracts me to the Green Party, is understanding, this ecosystems, and that's why some people say, well, it's in the environment, and I actually think an ecosystem is much broader than that. Ecosystem is everything we do. It's certainly related to jobs and economy and housing and civil rights. People say, well, oh, you're just a bunch of environmentalists. No, we're not environmentalists. We maybe want to call us ecologists because we look at how things, the web of life is one of the older variations of the 10 key values. And
well, Craig, think about it. Ecology is not, or environmentalism, however you want to phrase it, is not a single issue. It's all right. In his book, Energy and Equity, Ivan Illich, this is 30, 40 years ago, pointed out that when you don't have access to energy, in other words, a steady supply of something to burn in most places, that forces who? Women and children to spend almost all of their time going out collecting dung or something to burn. So when you have an equitable distribution of energy resources, look at the result. The result is you no longer have women and children spending the bulk of their lives looking for something to burn so they can warm their houses and cook their food. So the ecological issues also are feminist issues. They're also peace issues. All these things are part of the great web of life.
yeah, it almost goes back to the understanding of hunter-gatherer and you know, the gatherers being forced into chronic gathering because
Right.
of a lack, you know, a lack of what they need to gather. In this case, I would almost say that this whole austerity thing is really a trickle up, and it's very much tied to energy policy, the oil industry, for example, and now natural gas, and going after whatever last scrap they can burn, so that more people will cough like I do.
Well, I know that I live on the I-85 corridor, and people would normally assume that when you live in South Carolina, it must be pristine as all get out, right? Well, we are not only the nuclear armpit of the country, we also have terrible air pollution along the I-85 corridor. Charlotte, which is not very far from here, just an hour and a half, 2 hours away, has, I mean, there are repeated days in the summer when the message goes out, sorry for itching my ear, folks, repeated message goes out from the local authorities, it's too dangerous to go outside today. You need to stay inside if you can. Holy cow! If you had told me when I was 10 years old that the day would come when the government would tell me, don't go outside and play, I'd have told you were insane. Yep. But this is a reality today.
And that it's gotten that bad, and that people are tolerant of this climate crisis, of this environmental crisis, and people don't, you know, it's, I interrupt myself often, that people don't connect that it isn't, you know, jobs or environment. It's jobs and environment. You know, people say, well, the environmentalists don't want you to have jobs. No, actually, a healthy ecosystem is much more efficient, which means greater productivity, less wasted energy in terms of doing the jobs that we do. Reap more, and I don't mean in terms of buy consumerism, reap more, but reap more for what you know, fertile soil yields more food. Monsanto does not. If you know that their whole patenting of seeds and their pesticide-resistant food, so they can use their pesticides. What a catch-22 to a dead planet that is. More like musical chairs.
My wife and I went to a lobbying day in Washington, D.C. a good 26, 27, 28 years ago, sponsored by an organization called Bread for the World. And before we went out to lobby, we got some time spent learning about hunger issues so we would really understand them and we wouldn't be standing in front of a congressperson or a senator and sound like an idiot, please do something about the hungry. We had to do more than that. And one of the things that we learned is even back then, and I realize the world population was not as big as it is today, but the same situation persists today. It's not a question of having adequate food. There's more than enough calories produced every year for everyone on the planet to have plenty to eat, including all those starving children that we see. It's not a question of production. It's a question of distribution. We've got too many fat people and too many people that are starving to death. And I don't understand why people can't see the proper way to deal with that is to balance it out so the fat people aren't fat and the starving people aren't starving.
Right. It sounds like a health plan.
Yeah.
But it is.
Well, and know how to do these things. It's none of this is rocket science. It's the refusal to do it. And I think part of the reason that the refusal is there, and you mentioned it earlier, Craig, is fear. And those of us who are who have experience in 12-step organizations know what fear means. Future events appearing real. People are thinking this is going to happen down the road in the future. If the government does this, then that's going to happen down the road. Brothers and sisters, we don't know what's going to happen down the road. And that doesn't mean that we can't make plans for things and try to make the right things happen down the road. But if we let fear, the future events appearing real, keep us from accomplishing the things that we need to accomplish, we're going to suffer the consequences. I mean, none of this is without consequence. And if we don't, you can't do nothing and expect something good to happen.
Yep.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. As I've said to Greens, because this is something, again, being that I don't want to preach to the choir, I have things that I need to say to the choir, is that oftentimes when faced with a decision, I find that some Greens will decide that they take the safest road, which is do nothing. And I have to emphasize over and over again, doing nothing is a decision with consequences. There is no do nothing. You cannot hide from something. You cannot lock out what you fear. You can't. There's no place to run to, because on a small planet you end up running in a circle. It goes round that way.
There is no place to which you can throw things.
Right. And we collectively as a party need to be better at taking decisive actions in moving things forward. Jill, and this is why I like listening to Jill speak, she has so many clear, she's not afraid of taking positions and explaining how, and even amongst Greens you'll see people arguing this point or that point, or I would do it this way, where she's not really agreeing because she said, but she's decisive and she's clear, and she could, and she can substantiate her positions with logic and reasoning, and that's something you generally don't hear in people in politics. And you'd be surprised when actually running for office, more so when you're running for local office, where you do get heard, or you can get heard if you reach people, that people are actually impressed with that. People across the political spectrum. Again, another, because I like telling stories. I was speaking when I was running for the state legislature at an event at a funeral home, strangely enough, and the issue of abortion came up because this was a hot issue at the time in this neighborhood, because it's heavily Catholic, although heavily Democratic, the neighborhood I was running in, and someone asked. Both the candidates were there, myself and the Democrat. Are you pro-choice or pro-abortion, as they put it? Are you pro-abortion? And the Democratic candidate basically vacillated, went in circles and couldn't say, and this, and my response was, I am pro-choice, but I also understand that we live in a society where without economic support, where women are faced with an education or a child, a job or a child, that is like a Hobson's choice. That's not real choice. But I'm pro-choice, and we need to solve those economic and social problems, and we need to have community support for people. And after I gave that presentation, at the end of the year, this woman came up to me and she said, I'm a right-to-lifer. The Democrat wouldn't say either way where she stood. She said, you're clearly pro-choice, but I'm going to vote for you. She said, because I know I can work with you. You know, because there are things, because you understand, because even though she was absolutely pro-life, but she understood that I had a grasp of the problems people get put into that can be resolved.
We have a member of the South Carolina Green Party Steering Committee who is adamantly pro-life. And let me tell you what that means from his perspective. I mean, obviously, if he were here, he could tell you better himself. But what I understand his position is, I'm opposed to the death penalty. I'm opposed to war. I'm opposed to abortion. But I know that we can outlaw war. I know that we can outlaw, these other things. I also know we can't outlaw abortion. It isn't going to work. You know, women have pursued abortions when they felt they had to have them forever. And so, you know, I respect his position. He's saying from his perspective, he doesn't think that it's a choice that a woman should make, but he also thinks it has to be a woman's choice and not a man's, and certainly not the government's.
Yep.
So, I mean, once again, I realize that sort of perspective may be upsetting to some Greens, but I think that a lot of Greens have those kinds of perspectives. I mean, I've never met a Green who thought that a woman or a doctor should be thrown in jail because they either received or performed an abortion.
Yep. Yeah, and this is the kind of, you know, when Greens run for office, to be the kind of understanding to explain, you know, how to explain positions in a way that reaches across the spectrum.
Well, I don't have a problem with the Green who says, I believe there should be an abortion clinic in every high school, you know, and things of this nature. I think that's a supportable position. But I also don't have any problem, as I said, with a Green who takes the position like Rolf does.
Yeah. The key to me is understanding and being able to present the reasoning behind it, which will ultimately lead to the common or greater good. That's why I don't like thinking of people generally in terms of left or right, because I have friends who are conservative, and it's ironic that in talking to them, we often have very much the same opinions on things. It's just that they see a different way of getting there, but once you understand where you're heading to, oftentimes you can find more common ground than you originally expected, just as happened with that woman who's right to life. In fact, it's funny because I guess the comments I made in that presentation spread around the district, because I actually had a couple of right to lifers who actually petitioned for me and got they just felt that I had a grasp of at least some things they could approach, and I think that's why when it's like I see Greens who run in heavily Republican districts, and they veer towards the left, so to speak, and I said, well, do you understand the constituency and how to communicate with them? Another example is I was talking at a senior center in the Republican part of the district, and this was, some senior citizen woman got up and said, well, Newt Gingrich. This is when Newt Gingrich said, that he felt children should be if their parents can't earn enough money, children should be taken away and put in orphanages. And
did he really say that?
It was something to that effect. It was it was one of these shocking Gingrichy things. And my response, my first words out of my mouth is, I disagree. I'm for family values. and then I went on to say, most of the people, because this was a senior center, I said, many of you grew up in the Depression. I said, the last thing you need to do when a family needs to pitch in together to pull through rough economic times is to pull that family apart. That is immoral and unethical. And I think the moral thing to do is to support families. And at the end of that presentation, the nursing home, I don't know what they call it, executive president, approached me and said, given that this is a Republican district, we could probably put you on the board of directors. He said, because we would never be able to put a Democrat on. But the irony is that sometimes if you throw out this whole left-right stuff and understand how to reach people, you can reach people and you can bridge gaps, and it caused people in that senior center to rethink what family values meant. And I wasn't refuting family values. I was just saying that families need to be kept together. I could have sounded like a conservative to some people, and I guess maybe I did, which is why there was some very interesting enthusiasm for me. And funny, subsequent to that the Republican city council candidate after that approached me and asked me to work on his campaign. But I didn't. I disagreed with him on a lot of things. But we did actually end up working together on the term limits issue. And the local papers came out with articles. Craig and Craig and so and so to get it was kind of like a big deal, like the extreme left and the extreme right. But the thing is probably because they were looking at things as left right. I said no, we had common ground on an issue, and I'm not going to hold it against him that we disagree on some things because we agree on this. And we're willing to work together on this because that's how you make progress.
Right, and that's the goal, is to move our nation forward and to move our planet forward. I mean, we have some very important issues that if we don't deal with them over the course of the next 20 years or so, I'm thinking, it may be very tough for humanity and perhaps even the rest of the living creatures on the planet. We seem to be messing up pretty bad.
Yeah, and am I allowed to say I fear that consequence? But out of that fear, I act, not just react.
Right.
The fear motivates me to do something rather than run from, which is what so many people do.
Absolutely.
The hour is drawing late. The new day has started.
Yes, indeed.
So I think we should wrap up. But do you have any final closing comments? Any thoughts about Jill's presentation?
I thought Jill did a fabulous job, and one of the things that I really liked about what Jill was saying, as I mentioned earlier, was that she dealt with specific solutions to specific problems. I noticed that several people were saying we need Jill to run for the Senate or Congress from hey, if Jill Stein wants to run for the school board, I'll send money to her campaign. If she wants to run for the state legislature, I'll send money to her campaign. I think that having voices like that, like Sherry Honkla's, like Cynthia McKinney, I think those voices are important. And I think that more Greens need to be taking advantage of the opportunities presented by someone's campaign like Jill's campaign to say, okay, now how can I take this Green New Deal and apply it to a run for the Soil and Water District Commission? Or how can I apply that thinking to a race for the school board or the state legislature? Because those are, in fact, the places where we're likely to see our earliest and strongest successes. And as I say, James Island, James Island Public Service District Commission down on an island off the coast of South Carolina is where the only elected Green in South Carolina is. But you know what? Eugene makes a difference every day because the garbage gets collected in that community, and he's one of the people responsible for making that happen. So, he applies the Green New Deal to what he does down there, and I think that all of us can take advantage of Jill Stein's website, take a look at the Green New Deal information there, and figure out how it can help you to be successful in any campaign that you might run.
Right. I absolutely agree, of course. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. I'm very grateful, and I appreciate all of y'all who stayed aboard and listened to me wander off of the mouth. The only other thing that I would say is start a blog. Printers can be purchased for $79, and you can get ink for relatively cheap. Print off your opinions on a piece of paper, hand it out in your neighborhood. Start a radio show, start an internet radio show, post things on YouTube. The world is our oyster. We got to grab it.
Yep.
Because power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. Frederick Douglass. That wasn't me, guys. So let's take his words to heart and make it happen.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Craig, and thank you all for listening.
And you're very welcome, and I hope that we get to have you back again.
Anytime.
Okay. Take care, folks. That's it for this evening. I'll be saying good night. I hope you've had, both hearing Obama and then hearing Jill Stein with a very different response. And then finally hearing Greg and I discuss things, because all these things work best when they provoke thought. And then once the thought is provoked, that provokes action. Hopefully you have some resolve to and some inspiration to do, run for local office, organize. Really, our lives really do depend on it. It's not just a political thing. It's a survival thing, and it's a thing to make life better and us better. With that, I'll drift off into the night or the early morning, and a bunch of this has been recorded and will be played back. Unfortunately, as somebody's brought up the chat, the live stream does not have any way to record the chat. Unfortunately, that is an often requested feature of many services. It seems to be something that is not done by any of the CDNs that provide chat support. That would be a feature request. But the media is ours, as we're doing here tonight. So you will get the recordings played back within the next few hours. With that, I'll bid you adieu and have a pleasant night.